Welcome to American Education FM, everybody. I'm Dr. Sean Brooks. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. This is one of those episodes again where I was just gathering more and more show notes and I couldn't stop. And there's just so much going on right now and so many different takes that I have on a number of different things that eventually I just had to say, hit record. So here we go. Too much to bring up. Let's see. Let me start with this geopolitically first, just to kind of review very quickly. Fortunately, the Arizona rancher George Allen Kelly had a mistrial where, of course, he shot at or toward previously convicted illegal alien, a illegal alien, I guess, that was on his property, killed him. And then, as it turns out, the jury came back where 7 of them said not guilty, and one of them stood firm, basically, on a guilty charge. But either way, the judge ruled it a mistrial, and there you have it, so now he's free, thank God. So mistrial or not, again, it fortunately does show that there were at least the vast majority of individuals, all but one, that had some common sense. Again, he was constitutionally sound in what he was doing. It was his property, no trespassing signs all over the place. You have an illegal alien there who's been armed in the past, shoots and kills the guy, good riddance, and fortunately he can go home now, so there you go. And he is home, which is a good thing. Okay, so I just wanted to mention that very quickly. Let's see, there's this too. This list came out the other day, which I thought was hilarious. This is from prepgroup.home.blog. And it is titled 72 Types of Americans That Are Considered Potential Terrorists in Official Government Documents. Now, as you would expect, this is a variety of government documents that have come out over the years, certainly in recent time, either, again, whether it be the FBI, the DOJ, and the different moves that they've made, and then all of the things that they consider to be individuals who are or could be terrorists who live in America. I'm going to read this list because it's absolutely hilarious. There are 72 of them, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, 72. I can't get enough of this. This is perfect. Again, this is a perfect example, I think, as to why everybody's lost their minds if they think that government can fix anything. Government is not the savior of our problems here. Government is the cause of all of our problems, and they're proving it. So when people, again, rely on government institutions to do the right thing, or they rely on law enforcement to do the right thing, or the judicial system to do the right thing, or politicians, you're barking up the wrong tree. You're wasting your time. Walking away from these institutions is the way that you make them collapse. Self-governance is the way that we survive here. That's the way it should have always been. But government overreach and a citizen's reliance on government has led us now to this, and it's government openly telling us that we are the enemy. So here's what it says. I'm not going to necessarily say every number. I'm just going to rock down all 72 of them. So here we go. First of all, those who talk about individual liberties. That's number 1. Those who advocate for states' rights. These are all, again, the enemies or extremists or potential terrorists as far as U.S. government is concerned. Number 3 is those who want to, quote, make the world a better place. The next one, the colonists who sought to free themselves from British rule, or the people who say that. Those who are interested in defeating the communists. Those that believe that the interests of one's own nation are separate from the interests of the nation or the common interests of all nations. Anyone that holds a political ideology that considers the state to be unnecessary, harmful, or undesirable. Anyone that possesses an intolerance toward other religions. Those I love that. Those that take action to fight against the exploitation of the environment and or animals. Number 10, anti-gay. Number 11, anti-immigrant. Number 12, anti-Muslim. Number 13, the Patriot Movement. 14, opposition to equal rights for gays and lesbians. 15, members of the Family Research Council. Members of the American Family Association, those that believe that Mexico, Canada, and the United States are, quote, are secretly planning to merge into a European Union-like entity that will be known as the North American Union. Well, they already are. 18. Members of the American Border Patrol, or American Patrol. Members of the Federation of the American Immigration Reform, members of the Tennessee Freedom Coalition, members of the Christian Action Network, anyone that is opposed to the New World Order, anyone that is engaged in conspiracy theorizing, anyone that is opposed to Agenda 21, anyone that is concerned about FEMA camps, anyone that fears impending gun control or weapons confiscations. The militia movement is number 27. 28, the sovereign citizen movement. 29, those that don't think that they should have to pay taxes. Anyone that complains about bias. Anyone that believes in government conspiracies to the point of paranoia. Anyone that is frustrated with mainstream ideologies. Anyone that visits extremist websites / blogs. Anyone that establishes website blog to display extremist views. Anyone that attends rallies for extremist causes, anyone that exhibits extreme religious intolerance, anyone that is personally connected with a grievance, anyone that suddenly acquires weapons, anyone that organizes protests inspired by extremist ideology, and number 40, militia or unorganized militia, or people who say that or believe in it. Again, it's our constitutional right. 41. General right-wing extremist, citizens that have bumper stickers that are patriotic or anti-UN, those that refer to an army of God, quote unquote, those that are fiercely nationalistic as opposed to universal or international in orientation, those that are anti-global, those that are suspicious of centralized federal authority, those that are reverent of individual liberty, those that believe in conspiracy theories, those that have a belief that one's personal and or national way of life is under attack, those that possess a belief in the need to be prepared for an attack either by participating or paramilitary preparations and training or survivalism. That was number 50. 51. Those that would impose strict religious tenets or laws on society, fundamentalists, quote unquote. 52, those that would insert religion into the political sphere, anyone that would seek to politicize religion, those that have supported political movements for autonomy, anyone that is anti-abortion, anyone that is anti-Catholic, anyone that is anti-nuclear, right-wing extremists, quote unquote, returning veterans, quote unquote. And number 60, those concerned about illegal immigration. 61, those that believe in the right to bear arms. Anyone that is engaged in ammunition stockpiling, anyone that exhibits fear of communist regimes, anti-abortion activists, those that are against illegal immigration, those who talk about the New World Order in a derogatory manner, those that have a negative view of the United Nations, those that are opposed to, quote, the collection of federal income taxes, those that supported former presidential candidate Ron Paul, Chuck Baldwin, and Bob Barr. 70, those that display the Gadsden flag, don't tread on me. 71, those that believe in end times prophecies, and 72, evangelical Christians, unquote. Well, yeah. Guilty as charged, I guess. Honestly. Just keep begging government, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sure they'll give you exactly what you want. I'm sure they're the solution to everyone's problem. It's absolutely nuts. Let me mention this now. This was a nice article in an opinion column by a Mark S. McGrew. It was titled, Democracy, a 2,500-year-old scam. This was from english.pravda.ru. Let me just read a little bit from this. Please keep in mind too, and I know that you hate this as much as I do. You hear the word democracy all the time. We do not live in a democracy. We live in a constitutional republic. There is a difference. The Greek philosophers, the Roman philosophers, they also detested democracy. They said a democracy is not the way to go. That is ruling over the people. That is not taking into consideration the will of the people, to where, again, they have a representative say in what goes on, to where ultimately they are the ones that rule. That's what a republic is supposed to be, not a democracy. In fact, you'll never find the word democracy, of course, in any of the founding documents by the founding fathers. It just doesn't exist. They spoke out against it also. So let me read a little from this article. Nice history lesson here, too. It says the words democracy, democratic, or democrat do not appear anywhere in the U.S. Constitution. After the signing of our Constitution on September 17, 1787, as Benjamin Franklin came out, after his signing the new Constitution, he was asked by a local Philadelphia lady, Elizabeth Willing Powell, quote, "Well, doctor, what have we got, a republic or a monarchy?" He answered, "A republic if you can keep it," clearly. Now, of course, what's funny is it's the Democrats that consistently bring that up. And they, of course, they misquote it all the time. They'll replace republic with a democracy if you can keep it. That's not what he said. It goes on here. It says, one of the signers of our Constitution, John Adams, said, quote, "Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. Morality and virtue are the foundation of our republic and necessary for a society to be free." It goes on, it says, quote, "A democracy is nothing more than mob rule, where 51% of the people may take away the rights of the other 49. George Washington allegedly said this, but historians do not think that he was the first to say it. It is still true, regardless of who said it. It goes on here, it says, a near-perfect example of a modern democracy is Ukraine. While Zelensky is constantly beating his chest about Ukraine being a democracy, while constantly being sold to the public by corrupt Western politicians and corrupt Western major media that Ukraine is a democracy, what has Zelensky done with democracy? He has eliminated political opposition, canceled elections, bombed civilian housing, markets, schools, hospitals, and infrastructure, closed churches, employed avowed Nazi, quote-unquote, and ISIS soldiers. Well, that's not true. Neither one of those are true. Again, those aren't National Socialists. That's not who they are. The dudes with the swastikas on their chests and the shaved heads who are now dead there. That's not who they are. That again, it's a perverted what would you call it? It's a perverted slant on factual history is how I would put it. They're not the same thing. Again, it's apples and oranges. Moving on, though, it says, brought in mercenaries from Western nations, tortured and murdered Russian prisoners of war, and more that we don't know about yet. I would also answer that he's recruited children to fight on the front lines, allegedly, and he's gone into mental institutions and pulled out the retarded in order to put fatigues on them and a gun in their hand as they too go to the front lines. He's kidnapped the citizens of that country to fight for something that they don't want to fight for because they want freedom. See, there's a difference between a people, a country, the geographic land, and government. And of course, not even government, but an illegal criminal organization. There's a difference between all of those things. They're not all the same. So when people say Ukraine and the people of Ukraine, the answer is no. A people inside a country in a geographic area can be equally as brainwashed as anybody else. Look what's happening in our country. There are people who live in our country who know full well what's really going on in our country and have a pretty damn good idea as to what's going on. And then you have individuals who are dead asleep. The useless eaters, they wake up, they do whatever it is that they do throughout the course of the day, and they don't bother to even read anything nor pay attention to the world they live in. That isn't any different than somebody in a foreign country who has no idea what the hell's going on. The people here who support Joe Biden, or the people in our country, for example, who don't even care about politics nor pay attention to national affairs or geopolitical affairs, doesn't make them any different than a citizen in Ukraine who has no idea what the hell is going on and supports Zelensky and is so grateful for all the American support. You don't have it, really. All you have really are criminal organizations in multiple countries supporting one another on geographic land while brainwashing the actual citizens who live there into believing that we need to support them or not. That's the real problem here. It goes on. It says that Zelensky has violated the rules of war, violated international law, and the Western nations and the United Nations still scramble to support his democracy. It goes on here. It says democracy is socialism, communism, and fascism, all hiding behind a virtuous, smiling face of democracy. Again, words matter here. National socialism is not Marxist socialism. They are not the same. The socialism that you hear about, coming out of the mouth of Bernie Sanders, which I'll bring him up later, and in the mouths of people like AOC, that is not National Socialism. That's different. Communism is Marxist socialism. Same thing. That's all Bolshevistic. That's all Jewish created. That's where that comes from. And again, Zelensky's Jewish. The people around him are Jewish. I just saw an entire video of him sitting around a giant board table in some bunker somewhere, surrounded by rabbis. So if it's so Nazi, what's with all the rabbis? Again, it's hypocrisy at face value. And this is kind of a theme throughout this show here, because with everything that's going on, you talk about a double standard and qualitative reasoning and analysis, and the hypocrisy at face value, and people not knowing the definitions of words and the words that they're using. They don't understand the hypocritical messages that they're putting out. I mean, they're stepping on their own toes on a constant basis regarding everything. And I'll certainly bring it up later when I talk about Yale University and Columbia University. And of course, what they're all doing, and all those protests and pro-Palestinian protests, and, the Jews don't like it, and who's supporting what, and all of that nonsense. Our enemy is being exposed right now at a level that's never been exposed for. That again is why I could spend 5 hours talking about this, because it's happening right in front of everybody's faces. But if you can't pick up on the hypocrisy of all of it, you're never going to figure out who the enemy is. And we are surrounded by our enemy. It's everybody in Congress. It's all of them. Because if they don't mention who the enemy is and they don't bring up the problem, then they are the problem. Anyway, this goes on here. Sorry for the digression there. It says democracy has been consumed by Satanism. Well, democracy was created by Jews. So, see the connection there? There's a connection there. Again, Khazarian Mafia, whatever you'd like to call them. And of course, is it all individuals of a Jewish bloodline? Of course not. That's impossible. We know that that's not true. It just happens to be in their historic texts, where of course they worship Satan and hate Jesus Christ. We know this. It says the guy who used to play piano with his wee-wee on TV is crying, quote, Zelensky, of course, if democracy falls in Ukraine, it will fall all over the world. Send us more money and weapons. Well, the answer to that is yes. It should fall. We should not have a democracy anywhere. It goes on, and then I'm going to end this article with this. There's a quote here, and it says, a good definition of a republic is by John C. Alderi, firefighter/EMT, Southington Fire Department, Southington, Connecticut. Let's see. And they explained, quote, by definition, a republic is a representative form of government that is ruled according to a charter or constitution, and a democracy is a government that is ruled according to the will of the majority. Although these forms of government are often confused, they are quite different. The main difference between a republic and a democracy is the charter or constitution that limits power in a republic, often to protect the individual's rights against the desires of the majority. If you're confused about what we have here in America, it is a republic. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, unquote. It goes on here again. Okay, sorry. There's more here I want to read. This is a very good article. In fact, I'll put it in the description below. It goes on here and it says, the quote, democracy is two wolves and a sheep voting for what's for dinner, unquote, is attributed to both Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin, but history shows no proof of who was the first to say this. It may have been Socrates 2,500 years ago in ancient Greece, where democracy was supposedly invented. The best definition of modern democracy that I have heard is, quote, a system where the mental and moral cripples tell decent people how to live, unquote. That's a great quote. It says that is the system we have in America, especially among Democrat politicians. You can just take a look at them and tell that they are sick, physically and mentally. Listen to them, and you will be listening to depravity. Let's look at the birth of democracy in Greece around 500 BC, or 500 BC if you are anti-Christian, or BCE rather if you are anti-Christian. This is from the National Geographic Encyclopedic entry. It says the ancient Greeks were the first to create democracy. The word democracy comes from two Greek words that mean people, demons, and rule, kratos. Democracy is the idea that the citizens of the country should take an active role in the government of their country and manage it directly or through elected representatives. In addition, it supports the idea that the people can replace their government through peaceful transfers of power rather than violent uprising or revolution. Thus, a key part of democracy is that the people have a voice. The first known democracy in the world was in Athens. Athenian democracy developed around the 5th century BCE. The Greek idea of democracy was different from present-day democracy because, in Athens, all adult citizens were required to take an active part in the government. If they did not fulfill their duty, they would be fined and sometimes marked with red paint. The Athenian definition of citizens, quote-unquote, was also different from modern-day citizens. Only free men were considered citizens in Athens. Women, children, and slaves were not considered citizens and therefore could not vote. Each year, 500 names were chosen from all the citizens of ancient Athens. Those 500 citizens had to actively serve in the government for 1 year. During that year, they were responsible for making new laws and controlled all parts of the political process. When a new law was proposed, all the citizens of Athens had the opportunity to vote on it. To vote, citizens had to attend the assembly on the day the vote took place. This form of government is called direct democracy. There is no question that theoretically democracy can produce a very beautiful society. The problems come from those who corrupt it by rigging elections, voting against the will of the people, and just flat out stealing and manufacturing votes. This happens in a republic as well, as we can see. These things are so rampant in our own republic. The only way to solve these problems is to have an educated and engaged populace, which America does not have, unquote. Now I'm going to finish the article. I wasn't going to read this whole thing, but I have to finish it. There's only a couple more paragraphs, and this right here is actually going to tie into the rest of the show. Again, I will link this in the description below. This is a great article to send to people who have no idea what the hell is going on, and to understand that they're being manipulated with the use of words, the definition of words, when the words were created, and more importantly, who created them. Because unfortunately, in this article, they don't even say who created it. Not really who created it anyway, and certainly not who corrupted it, because that's the real problem. But trust me, they allude to it, and you know exactly where I'm going with this. So here's where it continues. It says, America is a republic with certain democratic principles such as mob rule, quote unquote. The majority elects our representatives, senators, president, governors, state legislators, county commissioners, city council mayor, etc. The uneducated and immoral populace votes for whoever offers them the most free stuff. The democratic form is corrupted by lying, cheating, thieving politicians on all levels of government. Thieving politicians on all levels of government. Well, who introduced that thievery? Who is it that introduced the cheating and the degeneracy and the stealing and the money manipulation and the taxation and all of it. If you said the Jewish lobby, the moneylenders who happen to be Jewish, and all of that, you would be correct. That's exactly what it is. It says the original Greek form of democracy was sensible and righteous, but was soon corrupted by the unrighteous, they say, the mental and moral cripples of their time, and that system has prevailed until today. So who are the unrighteous and the mental and moral cripples that they're referring to? You see the issue here? They're right there. I mean, they're right on the line. Just step over the line and say Jew. It's not that hard. It really isn't. It's not that hard because it's historically accurate. This is why they were kicked out of endless countries over the course of centuries. Thousands of years. Is for this reason alone. This is the problem. They within government, the apex, the good Lord, any of these Jewish groups, the Anti-Defamation League, you name it, they are all the unrighteous, the mental and moral cripples. That's a great way of putting it, because that's who they are. That's why they're always sowing the seeds of division. That's why they're always trying to morally decay everything and everyone in all these institutions, because it's anti-Jesus. It's anti-Christian. And they know that because that's who they are. It wraps up here, a few more paragraphs, just a couple. It says, all cities and counties in America have a democratic system where the citizens can come to a school board meeting, a city council meeting, or a county commissioners meeting and speak to those committees in person. The meeting leaders will give each citizen 3 minutes to voice his grievance and then shut them down. The leaders of these democratic meetings, playing on their cell phones or laptops, generally ignore the citizens while they are speaking and almost always disregard the wishes, desires, and the will of the citizens. That is why we have drag queen story hour readings in elementary schools doing pornographic dances in front of children, and why our schools teach extreme sexual techniques to elementary school children aged 6 to 12 and teach it in later years as well. The schools allow hardcore pornography in the school libraries available to 6-year-old kids, but will not allow a parent to read passages from the books in a public meeting, completely shutting down the constitutional right of free speech and hiding the crime from the citizens. Pornography for children is a crime. People all over America are arrested all of the time for kiddie porn, but not public school boards or school employees. This is correct. But who introduces this to our society? Who is behind it? Everybody always says, follow the money. Well, when you follow the money, where do you end up? It's like the rabbit hole, and someone says, follow the white rabbit, metaphorically or philosophically. What's at the bottom of that rabbit hole? Well, it's Satan, clearly. But when you come up a few notches, who is it? It's the Jewish lobby. Every single time. They're the ones that own the property. They're the ones that own the publications and the publication companies. They're the ones that run corporations. They're the lawyers. They're the money lenders. It's right there. This is the history lesson that is not taught. And if you taught this or said this and even proved it in a K-12 classroom or even a university setting, you'd have your head chopped off. That's the problem, because that right there is democracy. Chopping your head off for telling the truth. It wraps up here. It says, citizens who complain about problems with the government employees or frauds or thefts by the government will be ignored or forcibly evicted by armed police officers. According to Lord Alexander Fraser Tytler, a Scottish historian who lived from 1747 to 1813, the average age of the world's democracies is around 200 years. He said, quote, A democracy cannot exist as a permanent form of government. It can only exist until the voters discover that they can vote themselves largesse from the public treasury. From that moment on, the majority always votes for the candidates promising the most benefits from the public treasury, with the result that a democracy always collapses over loose fiscal policy, always followed by a dictatorship. The average age of the world's greatest civilizations has been 200 years. These nations have progressed through this sequence from bondage to spiritual faith, from spiritual faith to great courage, from courage to liberty, from liberty to abundance, from abundance to selfishness, from selfishness to apathy, from apathy to dependence, from dependence back into bondage. Unquote. And then the final sentence in the article is, and so it goes on and on with democracy, unquote. Again, the last part of that is that quote that you'll hear people say, where they'll say, weak men make hard times make strong men make good times, and so on and so on. It's really this. It's from bondage to spiritual faith, from spiritual faith to great courage, from courage to liberty, from liberty to abundance, from abundance to selfishness, from selfishness to apathy, and from apathy to dependence, from dependence back into bondage. We're already there. We're already there. We're at the end of the rope here. And according again to their historic accuracy, we're basically 50 years past our expiration date. I mean, think about it. Think about that. Go back 50 years. 50 years ago, we basically had dependency already. We had abundance. We had selfishness. That was 50 years ago. We're 50 years into this. We're already into the slavery. The only difference is we have the complete slavery now from a technical standpoint. And there are people who don't even know it because they're viewing the technical slavery as being a convenience. But they don't understand that the technical slavery is controlling their mind. That's a big problem. And of course, yes, 50 years ago, MKUltra was well in play. The American public school system was brainwashing everybody in leaps and bounds. And now we, of course, have all the streaming services and the video games and the technology and the movies and the misinterpretation of history and then the whitewashing of it with, Shakespeare is a black woman and all this other nonsense. I mean, all of that is a part of it. But it's the people, accepting this, or the people saying, well, I'm not going to vote. And that makes me smarter than everybody else because I just don't care. No, that makes you in servitude to the enemy, because they know that the more they pacify you, they'll pacify people to the point where they don't even vote. Again, are elections corrupt? Of course they are. But even at the very local level in numerous places across the United States, they are not corrupt. They're not. They're legit. I'm not saying that the people running in elections are legit. It could be two heads of the same snake, and in many cases it is, but you still have the opportunity to cut off one of the heads. And we have to exercise that right as much as humanly possible. I've said this before. Can you imagine me running for any elected position? Do you think I would hold my tongue? How many people would be able to hear or stand what it is that I'm actually saying, even though what I'm saying is 100% accurate? People are so brainwashed that when you tell them the truth, they run away, or they vote against you, or they scream and they shout. It's not because you're wrong. It's because they don't know what the truth is. We're already there. This is already happening. So there you go. Sorry that took 34 minutes, but it's a history lesson and it's certainly worth bringing up. In fact, I have one more quick history lesson for you. My dad pointed this out to me, and I have the page number, and I want to read it to you very quickly. This is from Thomas Paine's own writing. Now, I possess his book, which is all of his writings here. And this comes from his publication titled Rights of Man, Part the Second, Combining Principle and Practice in 1792. He wrote this to the Marquis de Lafayette. And this would be on page, 550 I'm going to start on 549 at the beginning of the paragraph here. Here's what he said. He said, if systems of government can be introduced less expensive and more productive of general happiness than those which have existed, all attempts to oppose their progress will in the end be fruitless. Reason, like time, will make its own way, and prejudice will fall in a combat with interest. If universal peace, civilization, and commerce are ever to be the happy lot of man, it cannot be accomplished but by a revolution in the system of governments. All the monarchical governments are military. War is their trade, plunder and revenue their objects. While such governments continue, peace is not the absolute security of a day. What is the history of all the monarchical governments but a disgustful picture of human wretchedness and the accidental respite of a few years' repose? Wearied with war and tired with human butchery, they sat down to rest and called it peace. This certainly is not the condition that heaven intended for man. And if this be monarchy, well might monarchy be reckoned among the sins of the Jews. Unquote. It's kind of like they had it figured out all the way back then. It's kind of like they knew. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that funny how that never gets brought up in a history class? Isn't that interesting how it never gets brought up by the Alex Joneses of the world? This is a big problem. When people claim to be historians and yet they don't go back into the actual text and look around. It's always been there. Benjamin Franklin said very similar things. They all did. They knew what the problem was. Thomas Jefferson certainly did too. He knew that the moment that we became a slave to a treasury, consistently borrowing money from the crown, which of course was owned by the Jewish moneylenders, then we would always have a problem. He was against it. And look where it's led us. We're 50 years past our expiration date. This is a big, big problem. And there's no pulling our way out of this. All we're seeing now is rats leaving the ship, stealing from the common man, and then divvying up the money behind the scenes. Again, whether this is really happening or not, that's another story. Whether it's real money actually making its way into people's pockets or not, I'm not actually watching a money exchange take place, so I don't really know. But if this is a show just to piss people off, I'd say it's working. No doubt about it. Okay, moving on. A few more geopolitical things, and then I've got a lot of education stuff, and the geopolitical slides right into the education, which is a big, big problem here. And this is a continuing pattern which I do not like, but I'll get to that in a minute. First of all, I wanted to make quick mention of this. One of Obama and Hillary Clinton's aides has been charged with child sex offenses. This is a Jewish guy. Shocking. Rami Shai, a former senior advisor in the Barack Obama administration, has been arraigned in Great Britain on child sex offense charges. Shai, who was previously coordinating the U.S. government's strategy against al-Qaeda and the Taliban, is accused of arranging the commission of a child sex offense and possessing indecent images of minors. Shai, a U.S. citizen residing in New Jersey, served under Obama and then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, holding key positions in the Treasury between 2008 and 2014. He was most recently an executive at Citi, although the banking group now says he is no longer an employee. Yes, I'm sure he's not. But isn't it interesting, all of the connections? It's just like, again, Hillary Clinton. How many friends does the average human being have who have, quote-unquote, killed themselves or shown up murdered? This happens among gangsters. This happens among criminal organizations and mafias and lobbies and you name it. This does not happen among the common folk. But again, Wasn't it her treasury that was, I'm sorry, when she was Secretary of State, wasn't it that office that was wrapped up in child trafficking organizations and allegations and actual criminal offenses of child trafficking? Yes, it was. In fact, it was even NBC that did a giant report on it. So there you go. Another one bites the dust, but we'll see exactly how strict the so-called punishment will be. My guess is not very harsh. Now, speaking of child crimes and crimes against children, there was a post on Twitter making the rounds the other day. I put it in the last war video, and it was an individual who said that they survived child trafficking, and that they survived the child abuse that takes place certainly among the quote-unquote political elites. They tell a story about how they were in a room and they personally witnessed political blackmail. They said that they were in a room where another child was bent over, a male child allegedly, was bent over, and there was a tripod with a camera and a person behind the camera, and then another individual, who was the actual blackmailer themselves, with their arm around what they later described was Senator Bernie Sanders out of Vermont, allegedly. And they basically said again that 30 plus years ago, they were told in this room that, Bernie, you can either have sex with this child or we will kill your family. And Bernie Sanders was crying profusely, apparently, and basically told again, look, this child has had sex before. It's not that big a deal, but your family being murdered, that's something you can't come back from. So, go at it here. And allegedly he did. Now, I don't have any proof of this, but it's not out of the realm of course, a reality. Far worse has happened to politicians, and this has even been described by current congressmen and women that this is how blackmailing occurs. That individuals are brought into rooms, a gun is put to people's heads, or people are threatened, of course, with the loss of their life or the loss of their family's lives or people that they care about. And of course, they blackmail them into doing something. And if they don't go along with it, then they might lose their life, for the people that, of course, that they know and care about lose their lives also. And then they enslave these people and they enrich them, of course, with money. And then so goes the story. We can assume that this has been done with endless people. Mitt Romney comes to mind. I heard a story a long time ago in this war that Mitt Romney and his wife allegedly murdered a little girl, and that was part of their initiation into their political life. This is, of course, why Mitt Romney has not lost anything, quote unquote. He's just now decided again to not run, which again just means that it's going to be new boss, same as the old boss as far as Utah is concerned, and whoever fills Mitt Romney's seat. It's just that Mitt Romney has gone out of favor now. The milk's gone bad. People know that he's not a good person. That goes without saying. But, this right here is par for the course. This is the game that gets played. So what I hope is that more and more people continue to call these individuals out. And if they are alive and they have witnessed these atrocities, that they get online and they continue to talk about what it is that they're talking about. So, again, I can't put myself in their shoes. Clearly, I've never been in that particular situation. But my prayer here is that they continue to speak out as much as humanly possible. And I know that they are afraid in many cases and believe that their lives are in danger, that they can be tracked down and disappeared without anybody knowing. But these people have to be exposed, all of them. And I think we're living through that right now. I think we're watching that. You can pick a name. I mean, look at everything that has been exposed again since 2016. It's been massive. Certainly since the Q drops, which is why I'm critical of anybody who criticizes the Q drops for obvious reasons. You're dismissing a deprogramming, educational, psychological operation that took place to wake people up as to how the world works and how evil it truly is. If you criticize that, well, that's too bad. then you're criticizing a very important piece of why we are here right now. So just, kind of keep that in mind. Let me mention this then too. And this is big, and this leads into a much larger problem, of course, that is happening both right now politically in America, certainly in the education realm, but it's also happening regarding what people are willing to tolerate. And I disagree with this, all of this. I think this is disgusting, and I think this is a massive problem. And this is not the first time that this has happened. This was from One America News just the other day, and it was titled, Melania Trump introduces Dr. Oz, Caitlyn Jenner, and more to GOP fundraiser at Mar-a-Lago. Now, Melania Trump, unfortunately, has invited numerous individuals and had gay fundraisers and even LGBTQ plus fundraisers at Mar-a-Lago for Donald Trump's presidential runs. This has happened back in 2016. And of course, you had Donald Trump standing on stage waving the rainbow flag. That is a problem. And of course, these fundraisers that they have with Bruce Jenner pretending to be a female. And then, of course, again, fundraising from these other criminals and other individuals. I think that this is disgusting. This right here, and it's not a large leap to make. This right here is why we have the rainbow flag agenda, the gay satanic agenda in American schools. This is part of the problem. As long as the likes of Richard Grenell and Melania Trump and other individuals are fundraising with these individuals, the log cabin LGBT event, as it was called, this is not good. It's this was Melania Trump apparently on social media saying we must come together around the principles of liberty, justice, and patriotism. By uniting our common goals, we can create a brighter and more promising future for all. Well, here's the problem. I'm not going to pretend to be a woman. I'm not going to cut my genitals off. And I'm not going to shake hands with people who move money around and support all of that behind the scenes. I'm just not going to do it. Remember, Bruce Jenner is a man. Dr. Oz believes the virology lie and supports all of this. He's Jewish, of course. He supports all of the mask wearing and the shot taking, and he was a big pusher of all of it. We have to marginalize these people. That's what we have to do. We have to push them back into the mental institutions where they belong. They do not belong in general society with the likes of us. And if they are going to be, then don't invite them to these fundraisers. We don't need them. If Melania Trump really wants to fundraise, she would do well to just invite average citizens to come and open up their wallets. But let's face it, they don't need our money. They have it. That's why they're in the positions that they're in. That's why they travel the world. That's why they shake the hands, eat the meals, live where they live, and they run for the offices that they hold. It's not because they need our money, because they already have it. But unfortunately, again, surrounding themselves with these degenerates and these liars and these criminals, this is a problem. Bruce Jenner killed a woman. Have people forgotten that? Bruce Jenner killed a woman behind the wheel of a car. He ran into the back of her automobile, killing her. Didn't do a day in jail. Not one. But Ethan Crumbley's parents have been in jail for 2.5 years, are now going to do another 10 to 15, and they didn't kill anybody. I could use numerous examples. The two blacks who stepped on the throat and crushed the chest of the white teenager in the parking lot of LeBron James's charter school in Akron, Ohio. Those two got off, weren't even charged with manslaughter, weren't even convicted of involuntary manslaughter. They got off with probation. I'm sorry. I don't support any of this. This stretches directly into the American K-12 and university school system, and it stretches right into those environments. The reason that these messages get perpetuated and why the hypocrisy exists at face value is because on one hand, you have Donald Trump saying, I'm going to withhold all federal funds to any school that pushes the LGBTQ agenda, forces masks, or vaccine mandates. And then on the other hand, he invites to Mar-a-Lago Bruce Jenner, Dr. Oswaldenstein, or whatever the hell his name is, to fundraise under the log cabin LGBTXYZ nonsense. I say horseshit. That's hypocrisy at face value. I'm smart enough to pick up on that direct contradiction, and I do not support this at all. And these people should be ashamed of themselves. This is disgusting. Still going to vote for him, but I mean, again, I'm not going to be lazy and not vote. I'm still going to vote for this guy, but I want people to understand I do not support this under any stretch. Go back and read my Substacks. It'll be abundantly clear I don't support this. So there you have it. Okay, I wanted to bring that to your attention. Again, the hypocrisy is thick. You need a chainsaw to cut through it, but it's right there. It's beyond visible. This now brings me, deep breath, here we go. This brings me to Columbia University, Yale University, and other universities around the nation who are holding protests, pro-Palestinian protests against Israel and the Jews. Here's the advantage I have. The advantage I have is I get to sit back and watch all of this and point out the hypocrisy and laugh, knowing that I have nothing to do with any of this. That's the enjoyable part of all of this. The unenjoyable part are the individuals that are falling for the media and political hypocrisy at face value. So just to review very quickly, and this requires a slight review. You, of course, will recall all of the university presidents, excuse me, not all of them, of course, but plenty of them coming in front of Congress not that long ago, and Elise Stefanik, representative from New York, basically crying, and, will you not call out anti-Semitism? Will you not do it? I'll cry if you don't do it. And then, of course, that led to the resignations of the presidents of some of these universities who actually were dumb enough to show up. Now, you can't subpoena somebody to show up and testify about, quote-unquote, something that's not real, anti-Semitism. You can't do that. They would have done well to just not go. But they went, and they got hung out to dry. And then, of course, the social pressure, which is a Bolshevik tactic, is exactly what was used against them, and then they lost their jobs, So, what ends up happening is now, because of the quote-unquote October 7th travesty, which no one can prove, and I find that to be absolutely hilarious also, is that, I have yet to see a dead body, and I have yet to see any gang rape of anybody, and I have yet to see kidnappings, and I have yet to see chopped baby heads and all these other lies that came out about that entire psychological operation. But either way, it was clearly an inside job, and it was used to justify the bombings of everybody who lives in Gaza. We're well aware of that aspect of it, because that's provable, and that's on actual video itself. With that aside for a second, what's of course happened now on college campuses, certainly over the last week plus, is you have alleged pro-Palestinian students camping out on the lawns in front of administrative buildings, engaging in their First Amendment right to free speech, free expression, and the right to protest. And then you have individuals on the so-called right wing of things calling these individuals terrorists and saying that they don't have the right to protest and they shouldn't be doing this and so on, and that they are in fact the problem. Let me read this one particular tweet from Josh Hawley, who I am not a fan of. I mean, again, you talk about somebody who's been blackmailed. It has to be this guy. Here's what he said on April 22nd. He said, quote, Eisenhower sent the 101st to Little Rock. It's time for Biden to call out the National Guard at our universities to protect Jewish Americans, unquote. What in the hell is the matter with him? And the answer is, the Jewish lobby has him by the blackmailed balls. It's that simple. The Jewish lobby has a grip on all of these individuals, all of them. I would like someone to prove to me that a pro-Palestinian student has physically attacked, tortured, hurt, raped, or killed a Jewish student. I haven't seen that. See, he calls for something like this in the wake of individuals, again, peacefully protesting something. Which, by the way, like I said at the top of this, I think they're all foolish. Camping out in front of administrative buildings and protesting while you're sleeping in tents, okay? This is not high-level thinking. This is very low bar, low IQ stuff. Your high intellect individual isn't even attending the likes of Columbia, Yale, or these other schools where they're chanting all in unison, saying all the same shit, wearing masks and waving flags. They aren't doing that. They're learning on their own, independently, away from these brainwashing Marxist institutions. Again, the hypocrisy is hilarious. You have Josh Hawley out here saying that the National Guard needs to be called in to protect students who aren't being attacked by anybody, against individuals, again, who are expressing their free right to free speech, their God-given right to do so. So it's so hypocritical now that apparently if you are, as they would, of course, want people to believe, or how it's being labeled, if you're pro-Israel and you're pro-Jew, then apparently you're anti-free speech, you're anti-First Amendment. But if you're pro-Palestinian and you're pro-Palestine and pro-Gaza and pro-Middle Eastern, so to speak, then you are anti-free speech, according to, again, their complete manipulation and hypocrisy of this entire thing. You even had Jonathan Greenblatt, the so-called head of the Anti-Defamation League, on one of these campuses calling anybody who is engaging in any kind of a protest a terrorist. So he's saying the same thing, in essence, that Josh Hawley is saying, which means they are of the same ilk. Birds of a feather flock together. So when you think of the Anti-Defamation League now, you should think of Josh Hawley. You should think of these kinds of individuals because, again, they're all aligning with one another. Again, I'm on a different dimension than all these idiots. I sit at a higher dimension and I'm looking down on all of this and laughing. And all I'm doing is I'm not taking any particular side. I'm just simply saying, look at the hypocrisy of these people. It's blinding. It's absolutely blinding. The staff members, I believe, of Columbia, all walked out. They staged a walkout because they can see the hypocrisy as to what's going on. And again, good for them. That's really what should be happening. It shouldn't be happening necessarily among the student population, although it can, because everybody has the right to freedom of expression. But at the same time, it really should be the staff members who are pushing back at their administrators and then getting their administrators to point out the hypocrisy of what's going on. Because let's face it, if it were tents of Jews and they're all tenting up and they're all sleeping in tents outside of any particular building, we wouldn't have this uproar, would we? The Jewish lobby wouldn't allow politicians to talk about it. This is also why you have endless individuals on the so-called left, in particular politicians who call themselves Democrats. They're the ones that are being dead silent on all of this. Why are they dead silent on it? Because the Jewish lobby owns them too. They may not agree with particular things that are going on, but if they speak up about it, well, their head's going to get cut off. and their funding's going to go away, and their blackmail tape will get released. And there you have it. Then they'll have to resign from Congress, and their cash cow goes away, and they'll have to go back to grifting another way. The hypocrisy is everywhere. Take the Gateway Pundit. The Gateway Pundit is a Jewish operation. It's a Jewish media outlet. The Hoff brothers are gay and Jews. We know this. This is a fact. But they call individuals on their own headlines, in their own headlines on the Gateway Pundit, they say that the inmates are running the asylum. And that's what they call it on a university campus, which, by the way, is a Marxist campus. The irony that Jews are the ones who created it. They're the ones that run it. But now there are individuals, of course, who dominate these campuses who are not Jewish. But now they're the inmates running the asylum because why? Because they're exercising their First Amendment right to free speech? Now they're insane because they're exercising their right to free speech, because they're anti-genocide, which is obviously happening. This is on film. I mean, that's a reality. But again, the likes of Josh Hawley and these other politicians, the Ted Cruzes of the world and God knows who else, they're not going to bite the hand that feeds. Hell, Ted Cruz makes at least $1 million a year from the Jewish lobby. This is our problem. This is the problem. And it's the people not calling this out that are perpetuating the problem and kicking the can down the road. We can't do this any longer. People have to start educating people about real history and what's really going on here, because then they'll start to pick up on the hypocrisy of what's actually happening at face value. Again, I think both sides are wrong. Both sides are disgusting. Camping out, like I said earlier, in front of an administrative building is so old. I mean, it's such an old tactic and an old process of protest that it's completely irrelevant. If you want to really send a message, bankrupt them. And you bankrupt them by unenrolling yourself. It isn't any different in the K-12 system. Same problem, same solution. You want the problem to go away? You want the Jewish-controlled lobby, university, brainwashing, torture institution to disappear because you disagree with the way that they're supporting individuals and cherry-picking particular issues and marginalizing others and lying about people and the double standard and all of that? You want to really get back at them? Unenroll. Go online. Find an online university. Learn at home. Get a job. Do these other things that you can do while you're studying at school. And then you'll actually learn about how the real world actually operates. Because it really doesn't operate legitimately within any of these institutions. You have to keep in mind, and again, it's in the documentary, The Lobby. The Jewish lobby even funds both sides of this argument. They're funding the Palestinian side of this too, because they're always looking for a profit. They're always looking to see where they can make money. Again, the media outlets are making money hand over fist even reporting on this. And who owns them? You see what I mean? It's all tied in. It's all this giant chess game, and they're moving the pieces around, and it's sometimes just chutes and ladders, and it's real simple. But again, camping out in front of administrative buildings to try to prove a point, well, you get to do it if you want to. Seems rather stupid, but if that's what you want to do, go for it. But at the exact same time, calling for the National Guard to remove these people and then having the ADL call them terrorists. And go, well, they're all sand wizards and they all wear the same, they all wave the same flag, so they're all terrorists. That's not true. That's not true. This is the double standard. This is the problem. And it's not going to go away. I mean, this is gaslighting to the nth degree. The problem is when a room is filled with all different kinds of people, you can't gaslight the whole room. It's impossible. Some people are going to notice the gaslighting. And some of us, of course, have to point this out. Because again, the hypocrisy exists here at face value. So Always take a moment like this and moments like this and use them to our advantage. We have to use them to our advantage. Again, we are on a separate wavelength than these people. We are on a different dimension. We're looking at all of this. And remember, again, this is a great matrix example, but people are trying to bend spoons. They're grabbing the spoon, they're trying to bend it their way and the way that they want to bend it. We're simply saying there is no spoon. You're all wasting your time. You have no idea how much you've been manipulated. Yes, innocent people have died, guilty people have died, horrific people have died, all of that stuff, and horrible atrocities, of course, have taken place, and we know this. But again, if you want to get back at the moneylenders, then you have to stop going to the place where you're giving them money. That's the way you get back at them. You don't get back at them by not taking a shower and then spending night after night in a tent to cancel classes, to then set yourself back further, so you think. That's not accomplishing anything. So are the protesters wrong? Well, they're not wrong on being able to protest. They're wrong on the method. I mean, it's a stupid method in my humble opinion, but I'm becoming repetitive at this point. You can easily see in moments like this, and I'll stop it here and move on, but you can easily see in moments like this where the hypocrisy exists, and more importantly, I think, where the control exists, and who's really controlled, and who's really blackmailed. There's no way that Josh Hawley sat around in his office and objectively thought to himself, I'm going to put out a tweet that is objective and factually accurate. That's not what happened. His phone rang, and his blackmailer said, put out a tweet and make sure that it's pro-Jewish and do it right now. And he went, I'm on it. And then he does it. That's how owned these people are. And it's all of them. It's all of them. There might be a few who aren't blackmailed, but they still signed on the dotted line, didn't they? They still signed on that congressional dotted line that said they'll take AIPAC money and they will support the Jewish lobby and Israel's right to exist, and they're our number one ally, and blah, 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 blah. I'm sorry. There's just too many people in bed with the enemy in our country, and it's everywhere. It's everywhere. It's at Mar-a-Lago, clearly. It's in all the universities, clearly, because they're all Marxist from their origin. And of course, it's all the way through Washington, D.C. So there you have it. Let me mention a few other stories, too. This is, frankly, is a couple of wrap-ups from last week. Remember the episode 600 where I was talking with my dad and I read the post that Jesse James sent me regarding the Michigan school and their gay day among their elementary school kids and how they were all going to sit around and listen to some audiobook about, I don't know, pronouns and being gay and all that stupid shit? Well, here it is. This happened the exact same day, actually. That Friday. NBC News, Sicily sent this my way too. Michigan school district cancels lesson on gender identity and pronouns after backlash. Shocking. Shocking that there was parental and public backlash, and then all of a sudden they buckled to the pressure because they had to. Because it's degenerate and stupid. This is the hypocrisy that I'm talking about, though. Again, Melania Trump is shaking hands with people like this. And then her husband is out there saying, well, we don't support this and we're going to take federal funds away if you continue to do this. Well, which is it? Which is it? Because I know that there's this fraction of the so-called conservative movement that says, no, we're gay and we do this and we do that and we're for gay rights and XYZ, but we don't support teaching this to children. I don't buy that either. I don't believe that either. You can't have it both ways. You can't divide up sin into particular categories and say, well, this is more sinful than this, and we are more for the least sin of the sinful. We're pulling out what we deem to be the less, whatever you would call it, the more appropriate of the sin as opposed to the less appropriate of the sin. This is the disgusting part of all of this. And as I said with my dad, and of course we both agree, they always bring this on themselves. These school districts are so stupid that they always bring the trouble that they make on themselves all of the time. But listen to how they spun this. Leave it to NBC, because again, anybody complaining about those lessons, well, they were the problem. That's why the school stopped with the lesson. The school stopped with the so-called gay lesson because the complaints were too harsh among the parental population. It says, after announcing plans for the optional lesson for a first-grade classroom, DeWitt Public Schools reportedly received inappropriate, angry, and threatening messages, quote unquote. So it's not the fact that it was a degenerate, satanic lesson designed to normalize perversion and sexual perversion among children. No, that's not it. It's because some angry people picked up the telephone and voiced their displeasure. That's why. See, this rationalization as to why the thing has occurred and to why the response occurred, this is the bigger problem too. These people aren't learning their lessons. They just aren't. There was this story too, which even Riley Gaines was pushing, and I'll fully admit this is a good step in the right direction. It's almost like they're taking my advice. You know that I've said this a long time ago, that when it comes to trannies playing in sports, and in particular females still participating in said sport where the tranny still exists, that if they just didn't play the sport anymore, the moment that the tranny shows up, then that sends the message and everything goes away. That you can't have a competition if there's only one person participating, and that person is a guy with male genitals pretending to be a female. So, how exactly do you solve that? Well, you just walk away. You don't even participate in the actual team sport itself. You all quit. Now, this is a step in the right direction. That's not what happened in this particular situation, but it's a step in the right direction. This is from the Daily Mail, and it was titled, "Trans Athlete Wins Shot Put by More Than 3 Feet as Middle School Girls Stage Step-Out Protest and Refuse to Compete Against Her, Him." See, it's a him. It's not a girl, it's a boy. Days after he won court battle to overturn West Virginia transgender laws. It says a West Virginia transgender athlete won it's a he, I'm not going to say her because it's not. They won their shot put competition in the first sporting event following an appeals court ruling that allowed them to participate as other contestants refused to play against them. The so-called Becky Pepper Jackson 13. Okay, look. Title IX has been wiped out. We know this. This is a brainwashed child, clearly, with brainwashed parents, clearly. So let's call this what it is. And at the exact same time in this video, one by one, all of the other individuals who are competing against this guy who's pretending to be a girl, they stand in the shot put circle. They just do a twirl, and then they walk off. That's all that happened. They do a twirl, and then they walk off. By doing that, they're disqualifying themselves or basically giving them a score of 0 feet or 0 inches or whatever it may be in shot put. So they're giving themselves a bad score intentionally in order to, again, protest throwing against a guy. Take it a step further, though. Just don't show up. Because, again, they can't compete against themselves as an individual. So, don't do it. Just don't even show up. Just quit the team. Now, if they show up and they're the only ones and they throw the shot put, it'll always be known, well, who did they participate against? And the answer will be no one. Because that will be the real headline. Boy pretending to be girl competes in female shot put across numerous high schools, but no one else competed, therefore there was no competition, and they allegedly were the only person, therefore they won. You're shining multiple lights on the mental illness here. More so than you would be if you were still dressing up, still playing the bread and circus, and still going along with it. So my tip again, just to reiterate, is don't even play anymore. Stop going. Don't even waste your time. You were smart enough to all organize to protest this thing and this brainwashed individual, which again, good. But next time, don't even show up because there can't be a competition if it's just them. It's always been that way. They'll say, okay, so it's time for these schools to compete. And they go, well, there aren't schools here, but there's this one person who's pretending to be a girl who's clearly not from this one school. So, what are we supposed to do? You throw everybody into a tailspin. So that's the way to go here. Again, just stop showing up. Quit the team. If you know that you're going to be competing against a particular tranny, and by the way, if you don't know that that's going to be the case, and you show up at some tournament and one just pops out of the woodwork, then walk away. Get back on the bus and go home. It's real easy. It's real easy to do. Just do it. That's all. Okay, moving on, and perpetuating, of course, all of this degeneracy in American K-12 schools. Just to review very quickly, did a little digging on the Oxford, Michigan superintendent, this Dr. Milligan gal. As it turns out, she used to be employed by the Columbus, Ohio public school system, and she was their executive director of teaching and learning, grades K through 12. So she's never been a superintendent, allegedly. She's, again, she was hired by their district office. She's clearly a hard-wing leftist, as we all know. Super degenerate, as you might expect. And this is, of course, the superintendent at Oxford, Michigan, where Ethan Crumbley killed 4 people, where they've decided to hire this individual to magically solve all their problems. Well, joke's on everybody. The Columbus public school system is one of the worst in the state. They are not good by any stretch of the imagination. The majority is black. It is I want to say 51 to 52% black. The vast minority is white, and they have not academically succeeded by any stretch of the imagination practically since forever. Again, Columbus public school system has over 30 some odd schools, 34, 35 schools across their entire city district. That's not unusual. But again, this is the individual that they've decided to hire to come in and solve all their problems. I find it absolutely astounding. This is not about teaching and learning. This is not about teaching the truth. This is about feelings. This was a feelings hire. Let's hire this individual because they fill a hole in our own damaged, brainwashed selves in order to justify all of our feelings in a particular direction, because this individual throughout their entire interview process consistently stated over and over again that they are trauma-informed. I'm trauma-informed. I'm trained in trauma, and that's exactly what I do and what I care about. No, they're going to fail. They will fail more miserably now than ever before for all the obvious reasons that have been brought up in the past, because individuals like that are responsible for hiring building administrators. And what kind of building administrator do you think such a whack job is going to hire? And then, of course, building administrators who then become whack jobs, and already are, who get hired by a whack job, who do you think they're going to hire as their school teachers? They're going to hire whack job school teachers. And then who, of course, is subjected to the whack job school teachers on a day in and day out basis? Do you see the slippery slope? This is the entire business. This is the way that it works. So there you have it. And they'll make money hand over fist for doing absolutely nothing. And once they sign that multi-year contract, if they ever get fired, well, it's a contract, which means they are promised money. Again, it's just like being a kicker in the NFL or being a vice president of the United States. Being an ex-superintendent is remarkably lucrative. And being a superintendent is remarkably lucrative. You can tell a whole lot of people a whole lot of things during the hiring process. But once you sign on that dotted line, you're rolling in the money. You're rolling in it. They have too much money that they don't even know what to do with. It's amazing. It's reckless too, but they're brainwashed, so they get what they deserve. Okay. Moving on, there was this. Also very typical, and I've brought this subject up before, and it requires just a very quick revisit. This was sent to me by a family member out of Missouri. This is from fox2now.com. Rockwood School District says threat is under investigation. Well, what threat? Could it be the same kinds of threats that the Oxford, Michigan School District has received that I've brought up in the past? Is it the same kinds of threats that all K-12 school districts across the entire nation receive, and yet we can't seem to figure out who's doing it? Here it comes. It says, quote, from Eureka, Missouri, police notified the Rockwood School District about a threat called into 911 to shoot up one of their schools. A letter sent home to parents says that they are taking the threat seriously, but did not find any evidence that it matched any of their students and likely came from outside the area. Police tell the school district that it is safe to continue with classes as normal on Monday. There will be an increased police presence at the district schools. It then says fake threats canceled classes at many area schools last year, and the FBI issued a warning about felony federal charges, saying that these cases are easy to investigate. Now here's the letter from the superintendent of this Rockwood School District, Rockwood High School. They said, quote, good evening, Rockwood families. Today we were alerted that police received a 911 call late last night that was threatening to shoot up a Rockwood High School, quote unquote. No specific school was named. We have been working throughout the day with county law enforcement, and information we have received does not match up with any Rockwood students. The origin of the call is still under investigation, but law enforcement officials have shared that it was likely a call from outside the area. We have been assured by law enforcement that there is no immediate threat to our schools and that it is safe to proceed with school tomorrow. But we wanted to make you aware, out of an abundance of caution, that we will have an increased police presence at each of our high schools on Monday, in addition to the presence of our SROs and district safety officers. Please be assured that the safety and well-being, here it comes, of our students is always our top priority. Every single time. Every single time. They could be rolling in a pool of bodies and blood, and they would say, the safety and security is our number one concern. It does not matter. They don't even hear the words coming out of their mouths. It wraps up here, and it says, the Rockwood School District and law enforcement officials take any threat very seriously, and we will take this opportunity to remind students that anyone caught making a threat or sounding a false alarm will be held accountable and face disciplinary consequences. We appreciate our partnerships with our law enforcement officials to keep our schools and communities safe. Please feel free to contact me or your building administrator if you have any questions or concerns. Curtis Kane, PhD, Superintendent, Rockwood School District, unquote. Let's review. This is all designed on purpose by the CIA to enslave everybody to a police state and to government. A fake call comes in or doesn't come in, and they just tell people one came in when it didn't. An email goes out, a phone call gets made, and then panic. Kids go home for the day. Parents get scared because they are gullible and they believe everything that they hear on their idiot box at home. They sit down on the couch, they watch the idiot box, and they just believe it. They keep sending their children into these environments to be ritually tortured through a lie, believing that some threat came in when in fact it probably didn't. And of course, they never catch the people. Why is that? Because you can make anonymous phone calls to anybody at any time, even using a virtual protection network, so they'll never figure out where the phone call came from. The CIA does this. Local law enforcement does this. They work together to just manipulate everybody below them. This is government manipulation to get people to be dependent on government. And it's working. Because they go home and they turn on their idiot box, like I said, and some school shooting, quote unquote, if they believe it actually happened, which most of them don't. They believe it happens, and then something like this happens in their school, and they go, oh, we're a step closer. We're just a step closer away from a shooting taking place. What are we possibly going to do? They're being manipulated. It's as if these people can't comprehend the concept of lying. That you just get lied to from time to time. And yes, law enforcement lies. School districts lie. The CIA lies. Government lies. But they would never lie about something like this. Wouldn't they? This is potatoes compared to something like 9/11. But they told us the truth about 9/11, Sean. That was all, that was factually accurate. And all the news stations covered it clearly, and I was there and I saw it. Yeah. See how easy it is to lie to people and manipulate them? And then it hits the major headlines, and then it's national news, and then I have to bring it up on the show. I mean, it's just outrageous. The gullibility of these people is second to none. Meanwhile, the homeschooling family who is awake and not brainwashed is laughing their asses off at this. They're just chuckling. Ha ha ha. They actually think there was a real threat. Joke's on them. They happen all across the nation on a constant basis, and it's your own government picking up the phone and making the phone call. You're being manipulated. Wake up. Here's another one. I know a guy, by the way, who wrote a Substack about this a couple of years ago. He's a good friend of mine. I happen to know him rather well. His Substack is theamericanclassroom.substack.com. Here's a story just the other day from Breitbart. It was titled, Colorado turns schools into welfare agencies as thousands of needy migrant children enroll. Huh. You mean illegal aliens are taking over American schools? And the ones that are closed because there aren't enough children in them anymore? And enough staff members to hire and so on because of course, the death shots and 1,000 other things. But they're actually turning these schools also into migrant centers? Could have sworn somebody said that a long time ago. It says Denver and other Colorado communities have transformed schools into welfare agencies as tens of thousands of children of illegal border crossers, that's another way of putting it, just call them illegal aliens, invaders, the enemy, something along those lines, flood into states' schools, where they get free food, clothing, shoes, healthcare, and education at taxpayers' expense. The Washington Post, reported that transformation of the Centennial States schools from educational facilities to full-on welfare agencies, where kids of all ages, many of whom have never gone to school in their entire lives, are enrolled by the thousands. Now, how many teachers do you think are qualified to actually teach these people? It goes on in the article later on, and it says it is not just Spanish-speaking teachers they need either. The current bilingual curriculum Colorado's schools have instituted is generally Spanish to English, but thanks to Biden's wide-open border, the schools are finding more than a dozen languages being spoken by the children of illegals flooding Colorado, including Afghan, Chinese, various African dialects, languages from East Asia, and many more. This is why Rome fell, ladies and gentlemen. This is exactly why Rome fell. Too many languages, too much degeneracy, too much illegality, and an invasion. What do you think's going to happen to us? I don't think the worst has come yet. I'm flat out going to say it. I don't think we've seen the worst yet. I think it's going to get way worse. The stories like the Lincoln Rileys of the world and all these other innocent American civilians that have been slaughtered by illegal aliens. This is just a snowflake on the tip of the iceberg. We're not even there yet. This article goes on. It says one woman from Venezuela happily told the paper that she gets, quote, everything from the Aurora school her son attends. Quote, this is the only place I feel supported, she chirped. Clothes, Wi-Fi, food, shoes, they help with everything. She even got free dental care thanks to efforts by school staffers, the Post reported. See, they're not even teaching in school. There's no facts in the curriculum, so all of that's a lie. But there's no actual instruction taking place anymore. It's charity work for illegals. They would never engage in real charity for their own American families in their own country among their fellow citizens, but this comes naturally to them apparently. Amazing. Finally, regarding education, there is good news here, and this is a good move, and this is a good thing. This was thrown to me by our excellent Louisiana educator. This is from the Louisiana Illuminator, or lailluminator.com. It was titled, State Approval of Louisiana Homeschool Curricula Could Be Erased. Now, here's what this means. In the state of Louisiana, even if you homeschool, you have to tell the state you're homeschooling, and then you have to prove to the state what homeschooling curriculum you're using as long as the state approves. There are numerous homeschool advocates, one in particular here who's highlighted, who's attempting to do away with that restriction, which is a good thing. People should be free to learn any way that they want using whatever program that they choose. This is the definition of freedom. This is the point. It says State Representative Burl Amity, if I'm saying that right, proudly acknowledges she homeschooled her 3 sons, spending 21 years total as their teacher before going on to advocate for other like-minded parents who eschew traditional educational settings. It says the Republican from Terrebonne Parish wants to make access to homeschooling easier for other families, but some lawmakers fear her approach will remove all accountability for parents who teach their kids at home. See, that right there shouldn't matter. If parents don't want to be involved in the education of their children and don't care if their children are being educated or not, as Thomas Jefferson would even say, that's 100% fine. Then that's on the parent. This is where you get survival of the fittest. This is where you get those that succeed and those that do not. It is not government's job to be the parent. It's not government's job to communize everything and make everything the same, which is what they've been doing this whole time. You've heard me say it before. Back in the time of Thomas Jefferson, he very distinctly said in his own writings, you cannot educate everybody because not everyone is educatable. That's fine. If parents don't want to educate their children and they want to grow up speaking in tongues and pointing at pictures of animals in a book and just making weird sounds instead of actually saying the name of the animal, that's up to the family. That's up to the family. It's unfortunate, but that's a thing that happens, and that's allowed to happen. Because again, if people really want to raise children, then they will raise them to learn facts, not just throw them to government and assume that government's going to handle everything. It goes on, it says currently, parents who want to homeschool their children must notify BESE, which is the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education, when their child enrolls in a home study program. They can use a home study program that the State Board of Elementary and Secondary Education has approved, or opt for a curriculum of their own choice. Either way, homeschool students graduate with a diploma that's equivalent to the private school version and not the state-recognized diploma awarded at public high schools. Now, first of all, I would say, well, what's the problem with that? You mean when they homeschool and they graduate using a homeschooling curriculum or an independent curriculum, that's equivalent to a private school? Well, that's great. Isn't that better than a public school diploma? Of course it is. You think an employer is going to look at, I mean, let's look at it from an employer standpoint, or even a college or university if someone still wants to do one of those things. If you look at on a person's resume and what a person has done or participated in or what have you, you have a public school diploma or a quote unquote private / homeschooling diploma for high school. Which one do you think is going to get hired? At face value, which one do you think carries more weight? I think we know the answer. It says Amity's House Bill 650 would end the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education's approval of homeschool curricula, leaving only, quote, non-approved, non-public programs, and calling them that. That's awesome. That's awesome. It says when parents interested in homeschooling contact her, Amity said she spends 45 minutes explaining the options and provides an 8-page document to detail. Her bill would, quote, simplify and streamline the process, she said. I love it. Now get a load of this. Representative Barbara Freeberg, every single time, Republican out of Baton Rouge, cited her 10 years working for BESE when detailing her issues with Amity's proposal. She recalled reviewing substandard applications from parents who wanted to teach their children at home. Quote, I know there were homeschooling programs where the person who wrote the notification couldn't even write a sentence, Freeberg said. Quote, I just have a lot of concern about not having a standard for homeschools that are approved, unquote. That's not up to you. See, that's not up to government. I mean, Thomas Jefferson would slap her across the face. That's not up to government. That's not for government to decide. If a stupid family wants to have stupid kids, ladies and gentlemen, that's our God-given right. I mean, it really is. As funny as it sounds. And I'm smiling and laughing. Yes, it's hilarious. But it's true. If you want to be a stupid retard, you get to be. And, God bless America. And that's the way it should be. It's true. That's freedom. You have the freedom to be as dumb as you want. And don't let government tell you otherwise. I'm serious. It sounds hilarious. And yes, I know we live among these people and this is the way that it is. But if stupid people want to raise stupid kids, they get to do that. It really is. It's their God-given right. Let them do it then. It goes on here. It says students who complete non-approved homeschool programs could still qualify for TOPS assistance under Amity's bill, even if they don't meet the required ACT score. The language in House Bill 650 mirrors another proposal Amity has authored that would allow homeschooled students to receive TOPS if their grade point average in TOPS core curriculum classes meets scholarship standards. Representative Ken Brass, Democrat out of Varici, if I'm saying that right, asked Amity about the lack of accountability in a non-approved homeschool program. To which she responded that state public schools currently aren't accountable to parents. Good point. Touché. Amity also touted that her bill would also officially shed the dropout label, quote unquote, from students who move from public schools to homeschooling. A designation, she said, hurts traditional schools during performance evaluations. That's an interesting catch. I didn't know that. That when the student leaves a public school to homeschool, the public school says that the child just dropped out. Well, they unenrolled. There's a difference. They don't like what you're doing anymore. That's usually the case, although in some cases it's a disciplinary action where, of course, they expel them, and then they probably just say that they dropped out when in fact they were expelled. Let's see here. It wraps up, and it says, there was some confusion among lawmakers as to whether some homeschooled students were eligible for proposed education savings accounts, or ESAs, which would give state money to families who opt against putting their children in public schools. The current version of the House and Senate ESA bills do not give students in-home study programs, both approved and non-approved, access to the funds. Though Senator Rick Edmonds Republican from Baton Rouge, has proposed amendments to his Senate Bill 313 that would allow ESAs to be used for homeschooling, and they should be. No one should be robbed if you don't go to a public school, and you shouldn't be robbed if you're going to a public school. It says the House ESA proposal heads next to the Senate Committee on Education, and the Senate bill still needs review from its Finance Committee. The House Education Committee narrowly approved Amendee's Bill 7-6, with Chair Representative Lori Scheigel, Representative Medieri, breaking a tie vote. Republicans cast all 7 votes in favor. The no votes included GOP Representatives Feinberg and Michael Melaneri, something like that, Republican of Shreveport, who formerly held a BESE seat that his wife now holds. Conflict of interest? Yes. And there you go. So fighting the good fight, giving more rights back to homeschooling families, and hopefully someday they won't be taxed if they choose to not participate in the public schooling aspect of things. This has to be the way forward, ladies and gentlemen. If that gets removed, okay, if that particular financial piece, state by state by state, gets removed, the smartest will leave, the dumbest will stay. The schools will have to consolidate themselves to accommodate the lowest common denominator of society, so to speak. They will get less money, there will be less teachers, less administrators. You can assume with that, however, there will be more brainwashing, more indoctrination at that point, but you will see a separation in society. People will start to learn the truth. They will break free from the brainwashing MK Ultra aspect that has been the American K-12 school system, public, private, and charter this entire time. And they will realize that they have the freedom to learn anywhere and anything at any time. And that there's no limit to that education. They'll start to connect dots. They'll naturally become quantitative and qualitative analysts of all sorts. They'll be able to figure out the hypocrisies, many of which I've brought up here in this episode, a number of other things. I mean, again, sky is the limit. It's beautiful. I love it. 2 jab things, and then I'm going to wrap up. I said in the last episode that I was going to play a piece of audio from the Oversight Committee on bias in the media regarding the jabs or whatever it was, and the whole COVID narrative, quote unquote. I want to play this audio because I didn't get to it in the last episode. Like I said, I was going to, but I didn't. So I'm going to play it real quick. But what you're going to hear, of course, is this Dr. Thorpe talking about basically nothing. It's shreds of truth mixed in with a much larger lie. And he, of course, is on Capitol Hill here from last week, acting as if he's in the right on everything. Talking about, again, the bias in the media and the misdirection and the lies of this and lies of that. But remember, you're never going to get invited to a congressional hearing to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but, so help you God, in particular if you know what that truth is. So he's perpetuating some lies. He's, again, talking about media bias and this, that, and the other very quickly in his opening statement, which is, again, what I'll play here. But the much larger problem is he's not getting down to brass tacks. So give this a listen very quickly in 3, 2, 1.
Now recognize Dr. Thorpe to give an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Wenstrup, Ranking Member Ruiz, and members of the Select Subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I'm Holden Thorpe, Editor-in-Chief of Science and the Science Family of Journals. The Science Family of Journals is published by the American Association for the Advancement of Science, one of the largest multidisciplinary nonprofit scientific societies in the world, whose mission, in short, is to advance science and serve society. Let me begin by saying how extraordinarily proud I am of the Science Journal's work, including in the first year of the pandemic where we worked around the clock. Further, I'm proud of the role that the scientific enterprise plays in society. The journal Science is unlike most other scientific publications in that it has 3 components, each of which operates independently. Each issue of Science covers scientific news, offers commentary about science, and publishes peer-reviewed research in many disciplines. As editor-in-chief, my role is different for each section. For the research journal, I oversee a staff of expert editors in different specialties. For news, I oversee award-winning coverage that is led by an editor and journalists who enjoy the same freedoms as any other media outlet in our country. And as part of our commentary section called Insights, I'm an opinion writer who appears on the magazine's editorial page roughly every other week. The peer review process is central to the scientific enterprise. For each paper we handle at the journal, we abide by a rigorous, multi-step peer review process that begins with staff editors who assess papers. These staff editors consult with expert colleagues and a board of external scientists. If a paper is determined to be potentially suitable for the journal, it is further evaluated by multiple reviewers who are researchers in related fields. This ensures that all aspects of a given study receive appropriate scrutiny. We also have a careful process to ensure that the reviewers do not have a conflict of interest. Most studies that make it beyond these evaluations are revised and re-reviewed to ensure that all reviewer concerns have been adequately addressed. Then a paper is reviewed again by our staff editors who clarify language and images to make sure they are consistent with the evidence that has been presented. If a paper makes it all the way through all of this, then it is summarized, shared with more than 8,000 reporters under embargo, and posted on our website. And then upon publication, it is maintained by us in perpetuity for any corrections and adjustments that happen after publication according to our well-established process. This process was applied consistently to the nearly 9,000 research papers submitted to the science family of journals related to SARS-CoV-2. It is applied to every research paper on every topic. Regarding the paper at the center of this discussion, the proximal origin of SARS-CoV-2, it was never submitted to Science. In fact, I had no knowledge of this piece published in Nature Medicine, nor the related letter in The Lancet until they were published. However, I want to call attention to 3 publications in our journal Science that are relevant to today's discussion. The first is a letter published in our commentary section in May 2021 from prominent researchers in the area of COVID-19 origins led by virologist Jesse Bloom. This letter called for a thorough investigation of a lab origin of COVID-19. When we published it, I wrote that good science requires that the laboratory escape be rigorously investigated before being ruled out. China should allow for a dispassionate examination of the data and allow scientists to do what they are trained to do. The publication of this letter turned the tide in the discussion of COVID origins towards considering the possibility of a lab origin, and I stand firmly by this sentiment today. I also want to highlight 2 papers from virologists Michael Worby and Jonathan Pekar, published in our research section in 2022. These papers present geospatial and genetic information that support, but do not conclusively prove, the theory of natural origin. They were initially posted on the internet as preprints, in a process many scientists use before submitting to a journal. They were widely read and reported prior to their submission to Science. Once they were submitted to Science, they were reviewed in accordance with the same process I just described. At the end of that process, they were edited under my supervision to ensure that their language was consistent with the extent to which the evidence supported their conclusion of natural origin. To be clear and to state up front, no government officials from the White House or the NIH prompted or participated in the review or editing of the Worby papers by us. In closing, I want to recognize the scientific community and my colleagues at the Science family of journals for their roles during the COVID-19 pandemic. We did not get everything right during COVID. No one did. But in 18 months, the scientific community identified the virus, determined how it spread, developed therapies that have had major life-saving impacts. Scientists, the scientific method, and peer review are national treasures, and I'm thankful every day for all 3. Now, of course, scientists are not and never will be perfect. We are human. But the scientific method enables us to reach beyond our individual limitations by requiring evidence and constant self-correction. It helped us end the pandemic, and it contributes to a strong and prosperous America. Thank you for having me today, and I look forward to taking your questions.
I'm going to work this backwards very quickly. Number one, I hate to break it to you, Dr. Thorpe, but when you said no one got it right, that nobody got it right, scientists make mistakes and none of us got it right, bullshit. Lots of us got it right. A lot of us were right about this right out of the gate. Right out of the gate. The moment that this trigger got pulled and this fuse got lit, we knew exactly what was happening. We knew there was a depopulation agenda in place. We knew that COVID was fake, that it's an acronym, that it's not being used appropriately from a vernacular standpoint, that the masks were bullshit, that the distancing was bullshit. We knew it from the word go. Sorry you didn't. And I'm sorry that all your science and publications and scientific method and all of those crutches that you lean on, which should be objective and clearly aren't, that you still fell for it yourself. But you don't speak for us. We knew that this was bullshit out of the gate. So no, it's not this no one got it right nonsense. What happened was we were marginalized, we were silenced when we were telling people the truth about what was going on, even within our own families. So yes, if your family can ignore you about you telling the truth to their faces when you've never lied to them in the past about anything, why on earth would some giant conglomerate publication or anybody else listen to you when they have more of a money interest in perpetuating their own lack of understanding or a full-blown lie? Again, there was no COVID. There was no pandemic. And it's not a matter of, oopsie, we all made a mistake. Don't worry, we're scientists, and sometimes we make mistakes because we're human. He's trying to save face, and I say no. Absolutely not. The ship has sailed, the die has been cast. You're foolish. I don't give a damn if one good article on lab origin was released or not. That doesn't matter. We knew it was a poison made in a lab, and guess what? It wasn't made in Wuhan. There were all kinds of jabs very similar being made in our own country. Fort Detrick, for example, certainly being made in Ukraine. This has been proven. This is a fact. We don't need to sit around and wait for the science publication to tell us because, we can't think without them. It's beyond ludicrous. So as he was testifying, nobody was in the room. It was all just this, the room is empty. That's the whole point. It's just pathetic. These people go, again, to testify in front of Congress, and they accomplish nothing. They just, they get to protect themselves on the record by saying, we don't get everything right, nobody does. And then at the exact same time, they get to save their own job and their own publication by saying that they're being objective. I'm sorry. They're just protecting themselves, and it's disgusting to me. Okay. I'm going to wrap up with this. Peter Sweden is all over Twitter. He has his own Substack also. I think I've read a few posts of his in the past. But his Substack is petersweden.substack.com or The Freedom Corner with Peter Sweden. And he put this out the other day on the 22nd, and he titled it, Huge, the WHO is backing down on the pandemic treaty. This is a major victory for freedom. Let me read this quickly. It's not long. And then I have a quick little reminder for Peter. Very simple concept that I think he's forgotten, certainly in a war. He said, quote, have you heard about the WHO pandemic treaty? They have been working on a treaty which would threaten free speech and national sovereignty. If it went through, it would essentially mean that they could censor speech that the WHO deemed to be misinformation. They could also force countries to vaccinate people and implement vaccine passports. Again, very quickly, while all of that is true, it's far worse than even he is describing. But I'll continue. He says, but now there is good news. They are backing down. In the latest draft of the WHO pandemic treaty, they appear to be backing down, removing some of the most draconian rules. This doesn't mean that everything is all good, but this is definitely a good start and a massive victory for freedom. First of all, they are making the treaty non-binding. This means that countries will keep their national sovereignty instead of having to hand it over to a bunch of unelected elites at the WHO. The big issue was Article 13A in the Pandemic Treaty. It was originally proposed to say the following. Number one, states parties recognize WHO as the guidance and coordinating authority of international public health response during public health emergency of international concern and undertake to follow WHO's recommendations in their international public health response, unquote. He went on to say that this text would have meant that the countries would be forced to follow the rules and recommendations as decided by the unelected elites at the WHO. But this entire article has in fact now been removed from the latest draft of the Pandemic Treaty, meaning that countries do no longer have to obey the WHO. This is a massive win for national sovereignty. It says, last year I held a speech outside of the UN headquarters in Geneva to protest the Pandemic Treaty. I warned of this and blah, blah, blah. He also goes on and says, this is very good news, because when you look at the Article 18 in the Pandemic Treaty and see what kind of recommendations the WHO would come up with, things get pretty scary. For example, they can recommend the following: require medical examinations, review proof of vaccination or other prophylaxis, require vaccination or other prophylaxis, implement quarantine or other health measures for suspect persons, implement isolation and treatment where necessary of affected persons, and implement tracing of contacts of suspect or affected persons. It says the recommendation means in reality that countries could have been required to vaccinate people, implement vaccine passports, and put people in quarantine if the WHO said so. Because 13A1 has been removed, it seems that these recommendations are no longer binding. They are still there, but countries aren't bound to have to follow them. Okay, look, I'm going to wrap it up here. Here's what Peter doesn't understand in war. When your enemy who's already done the thing that they're saying they want to do again, and they already did it, they did it in 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, and they're still doing it today in the United States. Quarantining, vaccinations, forced vaccinations or you lose your job, mask wearing. It's still happening, Peter. He apparently doesn't know this. It's still going on. People are still losing their jobs on a constant basis because they're not complying. All those quarantine camps that were set up, those aren't just going to be, for accidents. They're being used, and clearly the enemy wants to use them again. I digress, but just because the enemy says something in war that they claim they're not going to do when they've already done it, doesn't mean they're telling the truth. So I hate to break it to Peter and his Substack here, but it's called lying. And if the enemy lies in war, as they already have, and then they say something else that contradicts the lie, it doesn't mean they're telling the truth. It could mean they're just lying to you again. That's all. Any kind of a treaty that an NGO creates or a global government creates, which is what the WHO is, they're a global government entity. When they create this, they're not doing it for practice. They're not doing it just 'cause. It's not let's just play pretend for a little while. It's a real deal. They're doing it on purpose. It's a big on purpose. And so I don't care if they move words around in their so-called treaty. You'd better believe that people are going to follow this. You'd better believe that governments will abide, and it will be the most totalitarian governments that abide by this. Because they can't have a free society and a free citizenry walking around knowing more than they do. They already want us locked up. I read the list at the top of the episode. We're all terrorists, according to them. So no offense to Peter and no offense to the WHO, but I don't believe a word of it. I don't believe them. I don't trust them because I don't trust the enemy. Like I said, it's a legal document. So they say based on their own law that they create on their own. They can move words around all they want, all day long. Doesn't matter. I still say no. That's all. I still say no. Do not comply. We're about a month away, if less than that, from this so-called, acceptance of this treaty, which will be accepted. It'll be accepted. Why would they go to all this trouble to create this when they share money? The WHO shares money with governments. Governments share money with the WHO. They're all in each other's pockets. They're all giving each other tug jobs. They're all giving each other all kinds of money. Why on earth would they disagree with one another? They wouldn't. They wouldn't. They're going to agree. The question is who's going to say no? And this part of the war is not a show. This is very real. Tedros is the enemy. He was out there just the other day saying the same kind of things that he's always said in the past. That all the panic about the pandemic treaty is just propaganda and it's all fake and it's all this and it's all that. Ladies and gentlemen, they already went through with it in 2020. They already ran the plan. They already played it out. And this was a plan, by the way, that we learned from the Q drops, which was the 16-year plan to destroy the world. They were going to carry out the lockdowns to the point where you had to take a vaccination in order to be not locked down. That was Hillary Clinton's plan if she were in office. That's what was going to happen. That's why the good guys had Donald Trump win the 2016 election. That was the point. It was to put him in there to speed up the plan, to warn people about what was happening, to tell people to not be on a ventilator because the ventilator will kill you. He said this at the lectern in the press secretary room, in the press briefing room, rather. I've played these tapes very recently on the war videos of him saying it in front of Birx and Fauci. We were warned about this, to not trust government and certainly don't trust global entities. So again, in summary, I don't trust this. I don't trust the WHO, and I don't trust someone's interpretation of the WHO either. They're a government entity that already ran through with a plan that's killed hundreds of millions of people by now. Tens of millions, certainly, probably hundreds of millions without a doubt. And now what? You think they're just going to give up? Are they really? Are they just going to go, well, we were wrong. The free citizens that exist in countries, they knew more than we did, and they had it figured out, and we're the bad guys, and they're the good guys, and we're ugly, and they're attractive, and they're smart, and we're stupid, and that's the way that it is. Are they really going to say all of that and act that way? Or are they going to double down and make one more go and one more push on the battlefield to see who buys into it? Of course they're going to make one more push. They have to. Their hand has been forced. So, who's going to go along? Who's going to comply? That's the test coming forward this year, guaranteed. And if Trump gets in the way that people think he would, in an actual election where on election day they say Donald Trump's the next president of the United States, don't think for a minute that the enemy's going to quit even then. Something else is going to have to happen here. There was also this. I'll end with this, actually. One last scenario. I saw this on Twitter. It's from that Ariel guy on Twitter. It's an interesting scenario. That if Trump goes to jail for what has apparently, or what is allegedly going on in the court system right now, if he ends up actually in jail, is that when a trigger would get pulled, metaphorically speaking, regarding rounding up bad guys? That way, Trump's in jail, which means it couldn't possibly be him that's doing it. Is that when martial law would take place? That way, Trump's out of the picture. No one could blame him. In the eyes of the public, Joe Biden would still be in office. It's an interesting thing to chew on. Interesting thing to think about. As with everything, the only test that matters is the test of time. And time will tell. So yeah, be vigilant, don't trust the enemy, and take everything into consideration. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, again, a long one here. Thanks for listening. I appreciate it as always. God bless, and I'll catch you on Friday. Peace. Thank you for listening to American Education FM. Make sure and check out AmericanEducationFM.com for more information. Take care and God bless.